Good day, my name is Alvin Ismelius from St. Lucia, and I will be dealing with dynamic range processors. This tutorial is prepared as an assignment for lesson 4 of Introduction to Music Production on Coursera.org. Thanks for taking the time to listen. I hope it proves to be beneficial to you. Dynamic processors are bits of software that either attenuate, in other words, they either bring down the amplitude of a signal, or they add gain to the amplitude of a signal to the input signal, and then they give an output that is different from the original input signal. These include expanders, compressors, gates, and limiters. Expanders will basically increase the dynamic range of a signal. Compressors can either increase or decrease the dynamic range, but we usually, when we think of when you hear the word compressors, most persons usually think of downward compressors, which are basically decreasing the dynamic range. Gates are usually used to cut out certain unwanted frequencies like noise from an input signal. And limiters are generally used, they are basically compressors that prevent the output signal from being too high, and they're used in situations, especially in live performances, where the performer may tend to shout into the mic, or the mic might get banged around. So they are basically protective bits of software. They protect the audience. So let us look at some of the parameters that these processors control or manipulate. So we begin with threshold, and I have two graphs here. One has a higher threshold, the first one has a higher threshold, and the second one has a lower threshold. Okay, and you can see the first one only allows the top little peak to go to the output, whereas the second one allows many more parts of the signal. The threshold basically is the amplitude that must be crossed for a certain action to take place in the DAW or the plugin. And it's a very important parameter. Then we look at the ratio. The ratio compares the original input signal above the threshold to the output. And basically what the ratio in the plugin would do is it would compare the output after the signal is processed to the input. And if we have a 1-to-1 ratio, which means for instance, we could say 1 decibel to 1 decibel input to 1 decibel output, then nothing will happen. The plugin is not going to make no change to the signal. Whereas if we have, for example, a 2-to-1 signal, it means an input signal will be attenuated by half, or it will be cut in half. So the output coming, the processed signal, would be half the amplitude of the unprocessed signal. Another important parameter is the attack and release. The attack refers to how fast the processor reacts when the sound crosses the threshold. So if we have a threshold of minus 25 decibels, when the signal or the sound reaches 25, how many milliseconds does it take for the processor to actually do what we would like it to do? For instance, maybe we want to attenuate that signal. How long does it take for the processor to actually begin attenuating that signal and to bring it to where you would like it to be? Then we also have release. And release looks at how fast the processor reacts when the sound crosses back below the threshold. So release essentially is doing almost the opposite of attack. Imagine um, taking your hand and pulling a rope. The rope represents a signal. Attack would be how fast you actually grab onto that rope and begin pulling. So we're looking at that interval, whereas release would be how fast you actually drop the rope. Okay, this is basically my understanding of dynamic processors and some of the parameters that they manipulate. I hope that this was beneficial to you. Thank you and goodbye. Got to run.